The Kings blow a 19-point lead to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and along with it, blow their chances at making it into the top six of the Western Conference and getting out of the play-in. And now look, blowing big leads, like is 19 points even that big anymore of a halftime lead? Not really. OKC's a very good team. The Kings were very hot and unsustainably hot. Going into halftime, the Thunder were very cold, and so everyone assumed the Thunder would make a run, and that makes sense. And they did make that run. The Kings just were ice cold, and then they started definitely playing very poorly, making bad decisions, and that contributed a little more to the OKC run, and OKC got very close. And then eventually the Kings responded and punched back. And so you would like if that punch back came a little sooner, but still at this point, I'm not necessarily mad at blowing a 19-point lead, but it's how it happens. And so really you have to look at the fourth quarter and how the Kings were getting their offense as to why this was an extremely frustrating loss. But actually, not even just the fourth quarter. I mean, it was the entire game. The Thunder were packing the paint. And so I get it. You're going to take a lot of threes. They were packing the paint. They were loading up hard on Sabonis, not allowing him to score. And so the Kings were going to have to take a lot of threes. And it worked in the first half. You had Fox and Keon Ellis being extremely hot from three-point range. They scored 31 points and 33 points in the first two quarters, respectively. And then they cooled off. And we've seen this every single game since Malik Monk went down, pretty much. The Kings' offense has been awful, but it's only been awful for stints of the game. And at times the Kings are great, and that's when they're making their threes. But then the problem is, how do you adjust when you aren't making the threes? And I feel like every game since Monk has gone down, you have one half, not necessarily the first half, but one half where the Kings are shooting extremely well, and one half when they're not. And that makes sense when you don't have Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk. That makes sense, and you have to adjust. But the Kings did not adjust and instead shot 58 three-pointers. They shot 58 three-pointers and only attempted 38 from inside the arc. They only made one 2-point field goal in the entire first quarter. But then in the fourth quarter was where it felt like it got really ugly. Just taking absolutely horrible three-point shots. The offense down the stretch, it just was horrible. And at this point, I know it hasn't been that long since Malik Monk went down, but I got it the first game when you don't have him. You're like, oh, we're poor down the stretch because we're adjusting without Malik Monk. We're trying to do what we would normally do with Malik Monk in the game, and we're trying to adjust. At this point, like, you should have it figured out. I'm sorry. It may not be perfect. It may not be great, but I don't know what that offense was down the stretch. It's De'Aaron Fox walking up, shooting a three, and then another possession of him walking up, passing the ball to someone else, Davion and Keon kind of having it on the perimeter, and then giving it to Sabonis. And it's like everyone knows you're just trying to get it back to Fox. I don't know what the point of him getting off the ball in the first place was. But then you take the entire shot clock to just try to get it back into Fox's hands. But even when you do, you're super crowded on the perimeter and you have like four players out there. And it just results in another bad three-point shot. And De'Aaron, he was very hot from deep. But then late in the fourth quarter, he started taking shots that he wasn't even making earlier in the game. He was taking three-point shots, these pull-up three-point shots. Most of his makes in this game were off the catch or on sidestep threes after a flyby. But not once late in this game did he look to attack the rim. And I understand he was very upset at the officiating, especially at the end of the third quarter when he felt like he wasn't getting calls. He didn't get to the free throw line until the fourth quarter, so he felt like he wasn't getting the calls when he did go inside. But I liked at the end of the third quarter when he wasn't getting those calls and Shea was on the other end, he just went into like mad Fox mode and just drove straight into the paint and scored a couple of times. And we just saw none of that aggression at the end of the fourth quarter. And there was a point in this game when it was a tie game down the stretch and you just got Fox taking a bad three, Sabonis fouling Chet underneath, sending Chet to the free throw line on the other end without forcing OKC to actually run any offense. So gifting them points there, but then they miss the free throw. You don't get the rebound. Sure, you probably should have had the ball, but we got a call like that on the other end as well. You just have to secure that rebound. And then Shea scores. Sure, he traveled twice and got away with an offensive foul on one possession, where the Kings and Davion did play great defense, but then the Kings come down and do nothing offensively again, and just don't get close to getting into the paint. So yeah, did the refs have some pretty crazy calls down the stretch? Absolutely. Did it matter? Absolutely not. Even when the Kings were down 5, Keon drives inside, has an open layup. Chet is in no way getting to that, and he still passes it up and tries to pass it to Sabonis, and he turns it over. The Kings talk a lot about getting spray 3 opportunities, and that's great, but at some point you actually do have to score some twos, and the Kings just shot horribly from 2-point range. They shot better from 3-point range than from inside the arc. They shot 34.4% from the field and 34.5% from 3. That's pretty crazy. I mean, the Kings did plenty of good things offensively in this game. They were moving the ball early on and knocking down open threes. And like I said, the Thunder were loading up into the paint against Sabonis. The Kings were clearly ready for that, as they were calling out 3 in the key every single possession. You could hear it on the broadcast, and the Thunder got called for a few of them. But it just felt like at times, especially in the first quarter, but also plenty of other times throughout the game, that Sabonis was the only guy trying to do anything inside. And he had an awful game, because it felt like he was trying to force it inside. The Kings weren't knocking down their threes, so they're like, we just got to go to our big guy to score inside. Like, that's not how it works. And it did feel like the Kings went away in the second half from the ball movement and player movement of the first half very, very quickly when they realized they weren't as hot from 3-point range. There were a lot more Sabonis post-ups in the second half. I think Domas had 2 points in the first half, and then they just started going to him a bunch. So it's like, okay, you have a guy who has 2 points, and your answer to get him going is just to get the ball in the post and have the offense stagnate around him when the Thunder are clearly loading up against him. And it resulted in a lot of turnovers. He had 6 on the game, and it just felt like a super odd game plan. In the first half, it was a lot more ball movement. One guy drives, kicks it to another guy, drives on the closeout, kicks it to another guy for an open 3. Like, it was beautiful basketball. And that's just not what we saw in the second half at all. The Kings got plenty of offensive rebounds. They got 21, but there were plenty of moments where they just didn't capitalize on those offensive rebounds. 21 offensive rebounds for 21 second chance points. So they're scoring 1 point per offensive rebound. They had a million wide open threes off of those offensive rebounds that they just couldn't knock down. But also, it did feel like there were plenty of times where the Kings had opportunities to get inside and finish off of those when the defense was kind of in disarray. And I think Davion did a pretty good job attacking the basket. Fox, before the fourth quarter, was doing a good job of attacking the basket. So then you look at, okay, who else is going to attack the basket? Barnes had an interesting game, but he did attack the basket. He got to the free throw line 10 times. I think 2 of them were the defensive 3 in the key, so 8 times. So he probably, got fouled 4 times inside. And so sure, he's getting to the basket, but he had a really rough shooting night again, and he's been pretty rough in that area recently. And he was getting to the free throw line. He wasn't finishing inside. Keegan definitely not finishing inside. Sabonis not finishing inside. Keon had 1 layup on the game, I think, in transition. Lyles nothing inside. Len didn't even have a field goal attempt. Colby Jones, not much, obviously. And Davion attacked, scored twice, including an and one at the start of the second quarter, which was nice. Then got blocked in the fourth quarter. And so you just look up and down the Kings roster and you're like, who's finishing at the rim? And there's just nobody. But even if guys aren't finishing at the rim, or when they drive, they're not even trying to finish at the rim and they're passing it out for spray 3s, I still do think it's different coming from an isolated post up than what the Kings were doing in the first half, which was much better. If you're getting into the paint and they're really just loading up into the paint and you're taking open threes the entire game, then sure, you live and die with that. But just the way the Kings were getting their looks in the second half was much, much different than the first half. And it also resulted in more turnovers. They had 17 on the game. I already mentioned Sabonis's turnovers. Keon Ellis had 5. He was definitely pretty sloppy with the ball. And I think you just see it a lot with the Kings. When the offense stagnates, and I'm not talking about just the offense doesn't score. I'm talking about stagnation, of guys aren't moving, of everyone's just watching the ball. That not only leads to more turnovers, but even on the missed shots, I think it's easier for the other team to run. And that's exactly what we saw in the third quarter. The Kings' defense in the first half was great. They went a stretch of like 5 minutes without allowing OKC to hit a field goal. And so sure, OKC comes out in the third quarter, knocks down a couple threes, Chet hits a couple. Maybe slightly worrying that they're heating up, but it really isn't that worrying. The worrying part was once OKC kept getting out in transition. And when Harrison Barnes is wide open for 3 with no one even closing out on him, and he doesn't take the 3, and then I can't remember what happened after. Maybe he turns it over, or something bad obviously happened. I mean, he was wide open. I think that was the worst play of the game. When Harrison Barnes is just standing wide open, and he doesn't take the shot. And it's in that moment, he got yanked right after that. But in that moment, it's like, why are you out on the court? If you're not going to take that shot, there's no purpose for Harrison Barnes to be out on the court there. And so that was just an example of the Kings offense completely being out of rhythm. And in the first half, they weren't thinking, they were just doing. And you could see it, they were in the flow state. And in the second half, the complete opposite. Then Harrison Barnes and Sabonis got yanked after that horrible Barnes play in the third quarter. And the Kings punched back with a little 9-0 run. Keegan with a couple of scores. Fox attacking in transition, which was nice because there were a few times where he didn't attack in transition. And I can't stand when he doesn't attack in transition, when he has these open lanes and he has his speed and finishing ability. He did it multiple times this game, where he passed up opportunities to go straight to the rim to just like hold the ball on the perimeter for no reason. But he attacked. Keon hit a 3. The Kings went zone during that stretch, and then they kind of dropped into a man as the possession went on. And it was interesting because the Thunder saw that, put Shea over by Alex Len so that Len would have to guard Shea, and it didn't work for the Thunder. Len got out, contested the jump shot, forced him to put it on the ground, and then the help was always there for the Kings, and it worked really well. And so it was a good punch back. Then the Thunder made their run again. Shea just lived at the free throw line. He had 20 free throw attempts in this game, which was pretty insane, especially when you consider how he plays defense with his hands all over the offensive player. And the defenders on him just can't do the same, apparently. And so it was a bit of a rough end to the quarter from an officiating standpoint. So we were only up 3. Fox got that technical. And then the start of the fourth, the Kings coming up with like 3 offensive rebounds and on one possession, getting wide open 3 after wide open 3 and just clanking all of them. And then the Thunder come down, 1 3-point attempt and hit it. Barnes got inside twice for 4 points in the fourth quarter, but that felt like the only time the Kings got inside. And they just weren't able to take advantage of the time when SGA was on the bench because of their poor shooting. They got to the free throw line quite a bit in the fourth quarter, but there were also quite a few times where the Kings were able to turn him over in the paint. Keon doing a great job and other guys coming over and helping. Problem was the Kings couldn't really convert in transition. And the Kings' transition offense, time and time again, it really kills anything the Kings have going. Because it's such a momentum killer when you play good defense, and then in transition, you just, you run the ball up the court, and then you just throw it away. Or you run the ball up the court, and then just stop on the perimeter and get nothing, and then miss, and the other team comes down and scores, and it feels like you did all that for nothing. And so they have to be better when it comes to transition. Keon leaving his feet in the middle of the floor when he had Keegan wide open next to him. Fox on the perimeter, just watching everyone run down the floor and then whipping a pass inside with one hand straight to a Thunder player. Like what was he even thinking? I don't know. The defense inside on Shea and a few three-pointers kept the Kings in this game, and they had the lead a few times late in the game, but they really needed to convert their transition opportunities because they just could not get much offense in the half court. In the past this season, Sabonis has had dominant games against the Thunder, and so the Thunder obviously came in with a game plan against him, and it worked very well. And he had a tough first half, but he didn't try to force anything. And so, sure, he's out there with like 2 points and not the biggest stat line, but it's not really a problem because he's taking the attention and he's doing the dirty work inside, and we can live with that. The problem really came when he just started forcing things in the second half. He also had a bit of foul trouble, had 3 fouls in the first half, and there was a play late in the fourth when there was like 4 or 5 seconds on the shot clock. He has an open jumper. Instead, he puts it on the ground. Okay, he's near the rim. Is he going to go up for a hook? Nope. He passes it out to the perimeter for a bad 3-point shot with, 1 second on the shot clock. And those are the scenarios where he just needs to take the shot. Those low shot clock scenarios are exactly where he needs to take the jumpers. And I just don't understand how he hasn't figured that out by now. He is a solid shooter. He's not the best, which is why he shouldn't take them all the time and why teams are going to give it to him somewhat. But when he's wide open after you've run your possession, why is he not taking that? Especially late in the shot clock. I just don't get it. This Kings team is just so different when it comes to the offense in the clutch. I mean, I think that is one of the biggest differences in this Kings team to last year's Kings team is the clutch time offense. Because sure, like the offense overall isn't as good this year. The defense has gotten much better, sure. But when it comes down to it, the clutch time offense is just super, super ugly. I think a large part of it is Fox's increased 3-point attempts. And so a lot of the offense last year was him in the mid-range. This year, that's kind of gone. And so there were plenty of opportunities when he had a one-on-one or when he could have taken a screen and gotten downhill and he just didn't take them. And obviously not having Malik Monk hurts, but even when we had Malik Monk, the clutch time offense was worse this season. And most of the time, it's just like you need to get the ball into Fox's hands. But then it hurts when you get it into his hands and then he just does nothing and chucks up a 3. And at that point, you're just relying on a 36% 3-point shooter or whatever he is to make a 3, and that's your offense in the clutch. And it's probably that percentage is probably worse off the dribble. And he's been awful in terms of clutch 3-point shooting this year. Him and Barnes are 2 of the worst. And so with the Kings probably going to a play-in game scenario now, he just has to be better in the clutch because he is our clutch offense. And when the games matter the most in the postseason, whether that's play-in, playoffs, he needs to turn back into that clutch player of the year that he was last year. I already touched on Harrison Barnes' game a little bit, but really rough shooting the ball, horrible defense. Had a couple nice rebounds that surprised me a bit. Getting to the free throw line was solid, but I still think overall a bad game from him. Keegan Murray, I think he had a solid game. He went 5 for 16 and 3 for 10 from 3, but he had a double-double, 15 points, 10 rebounds. He had some really, really important rebounds. And I also liked how confident he was shooting the ball even after he'd missed a ton. But again, I've said it a million times. I think at this point, the Kings are just asking a lot of him offensively, as they have to be at this point. And so for him, the expectations are just for him to keep trying. And I don't blame him for anything as a second-year player pretty much, because he's out there making an impact defensively. And it may sound kind of stupid, but as long as he's out there giving it his best offensively, I'll live with that because he's just going to learn and get better offensively. And you can see the potential that he has. Keon Ellis had a crazy game, 20 points in the first half, was on fire from three, went 8 for 15 from 3-point range, 9 for 17 on the game. Stuffed the stat sheet as he normally does. There were some bad plays in terms of turning the ball over, but stuffed the stat sheet outside of that. 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Played some solid defense on Shea. Did as much as he could and forced a few turnovers inside. Was definitely our best defender on Shea that, we could throw out there. There were times where, we had Colby Jones. Davion did a solid job when he got switched onto him, but definitely too small to be the primary matchup. But Keon definitely was the best of any defender that was on him. And he did show, despite the turnovers, again, he is a young player who's being asked to do quite a lot for this team. But he did show some nice playmaking skills, like driving past a closeout, getting into the paint, and throwing that pass to the corner for a Lyles 3. That was a beautiful play. And this guy is under contract for, I believe it's 2 more years after this on no money, which is crazy if he's going to be our starting shooting guard going forward. But a great game from him. Lyles wasn't knocking down the 3 ball. Had some tough misses for sure, but I thought he had a solid game, working defensively, working on the glass. Definitely gave some positive minutes despite the 3-point shooting. Alex Len, a beast defensively, a beast on the offensive glass, as most guys were. Davion, already mentioned it a little. Loved when he was driving to the rim. Didn't have a great 3-point shooting night. His defense was very solid, took a charge. Played great defense that forced Shea into traveling. That just wasn't called late in this game. Nothing you can do about that. And then Colby got 9 minutes, had one nice defensive possession on Shea, and then, got called for a foul, just having his hands out there on Shea. Got to the free throw line, made both. Didn't look pretty, but he did make both. His shot just isn't there, and you can tell. And for him, like, he's given it, his effort is, 100%. He's going after every loose ball. I don't know if he should really be the guy. Like, he's had some really good moments, obviously, late in the game against the Celtics. Good game against the Nets. But is he really going to be the guy in the rotation as we end the season off here? I'm not so sure that's the right call. I just think some good signs for next year. I just don't really know if he should be getting these minutes now. And so I think we might see a change going to a Kessler Edwards or a Sasha Vezenkov, something like that, in these next few games. I also didn't mention it. Sabonis's double-double streak ended 8 points, 13 rebounds. So didn't get the points. Went 4 for 7 at the line, so he can have that to blame for not getting his points. Also not taking the jumper at the end of the game. So just an overall really tough game for Domas. It's a rough game to lose because we still had a chance, like a pretty solid chance. If we win this game, a good chance at the top 6 because, we're playing the Suns, playing the Pelicans, like have a good chance to have it in our own hands if we take care of business here, especially with Portland as the last game of the season. And the Suns are just getting demolished by the Clippers right now. It was like 32-4 at one point, with Drew Eubanks being the one to score the 4 points for the Suns. Portland is only 1 down on New Orleans early in the third. Like it definitely was there for us. But now it's about not letting the Lakers or the Warriors catch us. It's trying to stay in the 7-8 play-in game. I don't really care whether we're 7 or 8. It doesn't really feel like being at home or being on the road has really affected this team all that much. Sure, it might make a difference, but I just want to make sure we stay out of that 9-10 play-in game. And so sure, I guess, if the Suns lose, Pelicans lose today, it's still possible with us playing them the next 2 games. But yeah, it's pretty unlikely now. I just think you've seen that this team, isn't quite ready for being higher up in the standings. Like, we absolutely deserve exactly where we are in the standings, I think, because you've seen really good flashes from this team, but just haven't quite been able to put it all together to really establish ourselves in the playoffs. But no matter what, we know we're in a play-in scenario at least, and so we've done enough to give ourselves a chance to make the playoffs here. So the next game is against the New Orleans Pelicans, and then we have a back-to-back against Phoenix on Friday. Haven't beat the Pelicans this season, but they have not been looking the best. But I don't really have much confidence in our offense against the Pelicans, because our offense has been awful against the Pelicans in most games this season. And it's because they force us onto the perimeter, out of the paint, and force us to shoot threes, which is pretty much what we saw against the Thunder. And so I feel like at this point, we're just kind of praying that those 3-point shots are going down. We need a big Harrison Barnes game. I think that's probably the fifth time I've said that in a row now. Let's get a big Harrison Barnes game. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Royal Report. I will be back on Thursday to recap the game against the New Orleans Pelicans. Peace.